Let's go to the phone right now and bring in Monte Burke. He is a feature writer at Forbes and the senior editor at Forbes Life. He's also the author of a new book that just came out about Nick Saban called Saban, The Making of a Coach. Welcome to the show, Monte.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Monte, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is an unauthorized biography, correct?
That is correct. And Coach Saban made sure to point that out in his press conference last week.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure. I read an excerpt from the book. You seemed, at least in the excerpt I read, you seemed very complimentary of him, talking about his value to the university and how successful he's been as a coach at every stop along the way. Why do you think he's upset by this?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One is I am what he calls quote-unquote clutter right now. Nick Saban is a lot like Ted Williams, a baseball player. I think he'd prefer, if at all possible, just to operate in what's known as a perfectionist vacuum. And I think, secondly, it's a little bit to do with control. This really wasn't in his control. So, he made sure to let everyone know that it was unauthorized, which, of course, has some sort of really negative connotations. But I think, when he eventually sits down and actually reads it, he'll see that it's fair and accurate and informational. And, actually a lot of reviewers have even called it quite complimentary.
Monte, this Woody, don't you think that his entire spiel, and he is a control freak, was based on the excerpt that was about him going to the University of Texas? I mean, don't you think?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, he doesn't want the public, I guess, to hear what the two folks at Texas had to say. The two folks who talked to Jimmy Sexton, who's Saban's agent, and to hear that they thought that they had a shot at getting him. He doesn't want the people in Alabama to hear that. That doesn't really fit into his narrative.
I must tell you, Monte, I mentioned this the other day when talking about the biography on ESPN and also here, that I once was in Las Vegas and went over and spent the night with Willie Nelson, and he was by his pool reading an unauthorized biography of himself, and he sat there all afternoon going, "Oh yeah, this is true. No, I didn't do this." And I thought it was one of the funniest days of my life. So it was funny when you said when Nick gets around to reading it, he'll probably be doing the same thing. Yes, I did this. No.
Here's the funny thing is, I spoke to more than 250 people for this book, a lot of whom, or all of whom knew him, a lot of whom were very close to him. And some of those people actually got permission from him to talk to me. So, I mean, this is, the best man in his wedding, his college roommates, Bill Belichick, his best golf buddy. I mean, so I think when he does read it, he'll do probably the same thing Willie did.
Did he deny you the right to talk to him? Because Kevin Blackistone, who is a journalism professor and a guy that I work with on Around the Horn, said when you actually do a profile of somebody, the last person you talk to is the actual person, because you want to gather as much information as you can. I assume you tried either through the University of Alabama or through his Jimmy Sexton, who I know real well, to try and reach out to Nick Saban to participate, and I assume he refused to do that.
I did. I did a story on him in 2008 for Forbes magazine, which was actually on the cover. We actually got along pretty well during the making of that story. I found him to be a really fascinating and charismatic guy. And ever since then, I was planning on kind of doing a book. And, I talked to him a number of times and wondering if he would have any input. And he would just either say no or kind of imply that if he did, he would like to control, the whole process, which is something I didn't want to do. But I did keep him abreast of what was going on. I called him before I started, and I called him when I was done to kind of go over, you don't want anybody to be totally surprised. So I went over some of the things I thought he would like. I also went over some of the things I thought he would like. So he kind of knew what was coming, I think.
I find it interesting, your portrayal of him and what you just said, because the times I've been around him, I just think of him as a complete ass, to be frank. And maybe it's just the mainstream media, or maybe he doesn't like me, but what will we learn about him from reading the book that we wouldn't know? I mean, you said you did the profile, the cover profile. What is it about Nick Saban that the world really wants to know that we don't know?
Well, I think you see kind of behind the scenes kind of how he's become so successful, the factors in that, his motivations. But also I think you see him as he comes across, a lot of people think of him the same way you do. He comes across that way, particularly in public settings, because he's shy and rather introverted. In smaller settings, And I was surprised about this when I met with him to do that Forbes story. In smaller settings, he's actually quite charismatic and pretty warm. And actually, you know, when I think back on it now, I shouldn't have been surprised about that, because that's, you know, one of the primary reasons he's such a great recruiter, that he's so good at luring these kids in. I think you'll also learn that he's actually pretty sensitive. He's sensitive about the way that other people perceive him, but he's also sensitive in that, you know, there are more than a few episodes in the book where he breaks down crying. He cries about a potential or a job switch at one point. He cries with a player when they both talk about their deceased fathers. So, you know, I knew there was something more to him. I think what we see is just the surface. It's sort of the tip of the iceberg. And it was gratifying to kind of go through the entire process and find out that he is a pretty complicated person, that he's complex, that there are a lot of sides to him, that there are a lot of different opinions about him. So it was really, really fun.
Monte, from the information you gathered, what makes Nick Saban unique? There are a lot of great football coaches on the college level. Is there anything about Nick Saban that makes him unique, that allows him to have the success he's had? He has had more success than any college coach in recent years, outside of Urban Meyer, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the keys is that the destination is never enough for him. It sounds like a cliche, but he truly is a person who enjoys the journey. I mean, that, in its essence, is the definition of what's now known, of course, as the process. And this he learned from two different people. One was his father, who was this completely overbearing man who, you know, demanded this impossible perfection of his son. And in order not to sort of be crushed, Nick Saban learned to kind of embrace and love the steps taken in pursuit of perfection, as opposed to worrying about the perfection itself. And then there was this sort of very unlikely professor of psychiatry at when he was at Michigan State, whom he befriended and kind of walked him through process thinking. So walked him through, you know, thinking about the 7 seconds. I guess the average football play is 7 seconds. So concentrating on that 7 seconds, taking a little break, and then coming back and doing the same thing. And so, you know, I think another popular misconception about Nick Saban is that he's not happy. And I think that he is really happy. A number of his former players told me this. He's very happy when he's involved in the minutia of football, when he's watching that 10th hour of recruiting tape, you know, when he's on the field during practice, running his secondary players through the dummy drill. So, you know, I think that's the root of his success, is that he's never happy with success.
A final question for me. Would you put him in the top all-time 10, top all 5? We think about Bud Wilkinson going way back, Bear Bryant. We think about Urban Meyer and the success he's had lately. Newt Rockne, if you want to go back a long, long way.
Schembechler and Hayes.
Sure, Woody Hayes.
Lou Holtz.
Having spent so much time researching him, would you put him in the top 5, the top 10 of all-time coaches?
I think I would. I mean, for one reason is, you know, you look at Bear Bryant. He has 6 national titles. Some of those national titles, as you guys know, were purely just in name. They were AP titles, and then they went on to play a bowl game, and sometimes Alabama actually lost that bowl game. So it's a little, I think it's harder these days for two main reasons to win national titles. One is, you know, you don't have unlimited recruits like Bear Bryant did, and two is now you got to win your conference championship, then you got to go to the playoff now. So it's harder, and I think 4 national championships, even though all 4 of those were won in the BCS era, is quite an accomplishment. And in a lot of ways, you know, stands right up there with the Bear Bryants of the world. So I absolutely think one of the best. I think he'll go down as one of the best. I do think things change very quickly in college football. I mean, this time last year, Urban was still, you know, 2 behind him. All of a sudden now, Urban's a little closer in his rearview mirror and is 13 years younger. So, you know, this always fluctuates, I think. But I think as of right now, you'd have to say he's one of the best of all time, especially seeing what he's done, especially at LSU and Alabama.
Monte, assuming people can pick up the book at all major retailers and Amazon, anywhere else they should look?
That's correct. That's correct. Pretty much everywhere you go, every book place you go.
All right. Monte, thank you very much. Good luck with the book.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
All right, he is Monte Burke, and he wrote the book Saban, The Making of a Coach. And that segment was sponsored by John Elway Chevrolet, Colorado's #1 Chevy dealer.
When you go to buy a car, what do you really want? You probably want a lot of cars to choose from. And you want the dealership's best price. Not some starting price or target price, the best price. And you want it immediately, not after hours of negotiating. And you want a salesperson who doesn't get paid more if you spend more, because, well, you don't want to spend more. Well, you're in luck. John Elway wants all of those things too. Better yet, John Elway wants you to have all of those things too. Come see us or click on elwaydealers.com.